All right. Welcome to the Realms Deep. What are we calling this? The indie game music composer. We'll come up with a title
Yeah,
later.
sure.
Panel.
Yeah.
Insert witty title.
Yeah,
That
insert
works.
Winnie title here. So for anybody not tracking, I'm Ty. I do podcasts and shit, but I have assembled the greatest minds in indie gaming music to be here today, and then also two of you just tagged along uninvited.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. So if you could all go, I'm not sure if all of our screens are going to be arranged the same way, but let's start off with Metal Neon. Who are you? What do you do? How's your
Oh,
music?
I'm Mel Neon. I'm currently working on. I did the soundtrack for Scoothard DX, and I'm currently working on the soundtrack for Project Absentia, which is Project Absentia. So which is mostly very similar to Scoothard DX. And I just kind of like I'm very much like an enthusiast of a lot of like really old synthesizers and such. So like your sound canvases, your JV series, that type of stuff. I'm very much an enthusiast of old sounds, and that's just kind of what I do. I just put a bunch of old sounds together. I'm like, hey, let's just do that.
Immorpher.
Hey, I'm Immorpher. I'm a major Doom 64 and Quake fan. I started my music career making MIDIs decades ago, and I didn't bother to publish them until a few years ago. And thankfully, they're showing up in various Doom mods now. I programmed my own synthesizer, learning from what I learned in my science career using programming and signal processing. Made that to do dark ambient music, and that's appearing on various Quake mods, all those Finnish jams, alternative Quake music pack. And these days, I program various tools to upscale low quality sounds and to format MIDIs to the Doom 64 format. Just have fun.
I love the fact that when you introduce yourself, you don't say like all the games that you've done or anything. You just say like I'm a really big fan of Doom 64.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, if the game kind of overlaps with Doom 64, we're in business. I'll work with you for free.
Tony.
My name's Tony Manfredonia, and I'm the only one with not wearing black, basically. No, I'm working on Call of Saregnar, a CRPG kind of harkening back to the 1990s, late 90s, and my music is very classically driven, very classical, very orchestral. In fact, that's the kind of world that I lived in. I was a classical concert composer, purely that for a while before even going into games. And when I met Damian, he said, "Hey, your stuff would be great for this project." And here I am. I've worked on a couple other games too, but right now I'm primarily working on Call of Saregnar as well as a few others. But I think Call of Saregnar is the most fun for me because it falls in line with what I make naturally, I suppose. So that's me.
That's why I love you so much. John.
Howdy, I'm John S. Weekly, also known as Primeval on various different social medias. I'm currently working on Doombringer, Dread Templar, Age of Hell, Vomitoreum, and others, plenty of others. And I came from the Doom modding community, working on MIDI stuff like, there you go, working on like Unholy Realms, Reverie, Plutonia Revisited, eventually upgraded to, well, I shouldn't say upgraded, but moved over to like actual audio, making like synthy style music for Ashes, orchestrated music for Abysm, and currently I'm doing a lot of like metal stuff, like for Age of Hell or Bastion of Chaos and stuff like that.
Remind me to send you a new T-shirt. I really like the one you have on, but I've got more like right over there.
Sounds good.
All right, Jimmy.
Howdy, I'm Jimmy Paddock. I am that MIDI guy, which is my moniker on Twitter at least. I'm the guy who basically exclusively writes general MIDI songs for various Doom community mods or Doom community adjacent indie projects. I've got my own in the works called Adventures of Square. May have heard of it. I've also done the MIDI soundtrack for a couple of like fairly big releases recently, which those would be Sigil, the official 5th episode of Ultimate Doom that John Romero put together a couple years back, and also those MIDI soundtrack for Proteus, which is an in-progress indie game, which if you haven't seen it, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so working on a few projects like that. Basically, just trying to instigate my own sort of like general MIDI renaissance in the boomer shooter community, if you can call it that.
I was gonna say you had the best hair, but like Metal Neon's hair looks very dapper today. Not sure. Look at that. Just and then finally, Foamy, you were the final joiner. I couldn't even get Foamy into the group chat because we weren't friends on Discord or whatever.
It was all last minute. Yeah, and it's I'm probably the only guy who has not made quite anything that's been released as far as game music, but I am a longtime professional musician, ex-studio engineer, mastering engineer, mixing. I did the whole thing, so I have a lot of industry knowledge. I'm going to be doing I'm a multi-instrumentalist, so I'm going to be doing my whole soundtrack myself. And I just glad to be here, provide a little bit of industry knowledge on a deeper level, if anybody is interested.
So who do we want to pick on first? Let's poll the room.
Oh, like effects and stuff, mixing and tips, tricks, all that stuff. Pick my brain. Feel free.
So what we're saying is we're going to pick on Foamy first, since he doesn't have any music for us to listen to.
No,
So
not yet.
I guess we'll tackle it from this standpoint, and everybody can just kind of pile on him as you see fit. But so you're working on Unleash Hell.
Yes.
And this is very much in the vein of like kind of what Realms Deep was founded on. This is a very super gory, scary, like kind of metal themed game in hell, that kind of thing. Which is Primeval's domain,
right?
And Immorpher's domain. And I think we got a pretty representative group here. But I guess where would you say the challenges are for you, having come from the musical industry and then transitioned into games? And then is it different? Is it a different writing process? Is it a different creative process for you to make game music than it was as a professional touring musician?
A little bit, because I feel like, when you're not focused on games, you don't really have vocals, lyrics. Mm-hmm. So a lot of, music is revolved kind of around the story of the song itself. I've seen productions change numerous times based on a lyrical change. So I think that kind of part of it is not there with gaming, but instead of a lyrical kind of journey, you're more of a visual journey. So it's kind of the same thing, I think, but on a different input on what inspires you on what you write.
Mm-hmm. So how did that, I don't know, how did that change for you though? Like, because I get it.
I don't feel like it really did.
But,
yeah, I don't feel like it really did. Like, I mean, making music is still kind of the same process. You have your instruments that you like to use. You have, your style you play in. You have a genre that you're looking to make. Everybody has their favorite, plugins, DAW, desk, whatever. They all have their favorites. So we all kind of go about it, I think, the same way. It's just a different source that the music's going to sit on or sit with. That's all. I don't think for me, the process, I don't feel like is any different.
So, John, you work with, do you specifically just like do all electronic music, or do you work with like guitars and things in your?
Just purely electronical.
Okay.
Just a keyboard.
Does anyone else here like play an actual instrument other than like, I mean, Tony, you do everything, but it's weird.
I only do, I'm frankly, most of my stuff is very MIDI oriented. What I'll do is actually, I'll get the sheet music and send it to a friend. I have a great violinist friend. She's out in the UK that she's going to be playing on the Call of Saregnar soundtrack. But that's just, she remote records, then I put it in. But I really only play piano and sing.
It's one of the things that I talked about with you, Jimmy, when the first time you were on the show, was that like, do you even play an instrument? You're like, well, I play the MIDI. I'm like, what?
Well, I mean, keyboard is like an actual instrument. Like that is just as easily just a thing that you can use to have like a tactile feeling that you're producing the music, and you're getting that feedback from the instrument itself, and that actually really does streamline the process once you've got it all set up correctly. Once you've got a little bit of your practice and the theory knowledge behind you as well.
Yeah, when it comes to ambient, a lot of it just relies on mixing. So I don't touch an instrument with that. But you talked to Smileslice about playing guitar, and a while back I sent a track that will also be appearing on the E1M1 album, which is me actually playing guitar. And for me, it was like, I don't care if I'm sloppy. I just call it black metal. So that's as close as I get.
Is there any other black metal fans in the crowd tonight? Because that's my favorite genre of music. It's so,
I dabbled a little, you know. Right now, I'm kind of listening a lot, and I know it's not necessarily black metal, but I'm listening to a lot of Lamb of God right now.
oh, dude.
Oh, dude, Blythe, I love him. Anyways, and Kill the Priest, because I feel like that is kind of the direction I sort of want to go with the soundtrack or the OST for Unleash Hells. I want it to be, you know, really fast and furious. So a lot of double bass, a lot of, you know, so I've been listening to a lot of Lamb of God recently. So yeah, I guess, you know, almost there a little bit. You know, I've listened to Carcass and a few other things, you know, stuff like that, but I feel like it needs to be just a little bit more riffy, and that's where Lamb of God comes in.
How
Sorry.
how did you get into, so if you don't mind me asking, how did you get
Please.
into the game music industry? Because again, while I wasn't doing the touring, mixing and stuff and all that side of things, I also came from a separate industry, so to speak. So what brought you to writing a game soundtrack?
Because I started making a game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Well, see, I was you know, longtime professional musician, and as you can tell by the gray, I'm a little older. I've done my time, and you know, the music industry just isn't what it used to be, and it's a lot harder for an old dog to make it. And so I think a lot of us, as we, you know, transition from stage, we transition to studio, do studio work, you know, maybe some studio sessions as a player. And my interest was always, though, on the desk. I'd always been a fan of just all, I don't know, I think it was just the flashing lights and all the knobs and dials that drew me in at first, you know, these big giant consoles. But ultimately, I had a knack for it. And so I went and transitioned from playing on stage to doing more studio work. And then people started sending me projects to master. I got to do a really cool project that I can't really talk about because then unfortunately it never really came to light today, but I can say who it was for. It was for Disney. It was a really cool thing that I would love to have had happen. But so yeah, I transitioned from that into, you know, obviously the studio stuff. And man, you can only do that for so long before it kind of starts sucking the life out of you.
Yeah.
So I had always been a geek in the background, kind of a nerdy guy who loved programming. So I had, you know, side projects, modding and things. And I just one day decided, you know, I'd like to do something different with my life, and I'll try making a game. And then, of course, because I'm a multi-instrumentalist, I have my own, you know, studio and I can do my own stuff. I said, well, I'll just do my own music too. That'd be great. It'd be fun because then I can do the music too. So that's how I ended up here.
That's awesome.
Nice.
You've really, like, for those not tracking, and you'll all see this when Realms Deep shit happens, or it just happened right now, haha. Foamy I was on a recent recording of In the Keep podcast that will come out with the whole shebang, and that's a lot of what we talked about, was just how music as an art form really elevates the whole, you know, any art form, but really games without music is nothing.
Yeah, it's
there's so many songs that are, you know, the theme songs of games, or like just that little tune that played in a specific level that people will never ever forget, because it's part of a more memorable experience than just hearing a song or just whatever. I mean, everybody's got that song that when they hear it, they're like, man, that's the first time I made out with a girl, or whatever.
And just like for us, just imagine never hearing dun 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 dun. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Tony's the only one that didn't get that.
Like you hear
I
that,
recognize it, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is.
I can give you a
really terrible version of the opening thing of Doom, but you know, like you,
Doom,
yeah,
that's it. Okay.
E1M1. It's the very
Yeah.
first thing you hear, but I mean, it's such an iconic thing that you literally could hear those first 4 or 5 notes, and it's like, oh, I know exactly what that is. So, imagine Doom without that.
So that's going to be a big part of where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 out of 7 of us are pretty much going to have a big influence from Doom, right? Like that's really a huge part of what we do.
Yeah.
And I think the perfect person to talk about that would probably be Jimmy. So let's pick on him for the next 10 minutes.
Alrighty.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely grew up with Doom. I think I've been playing it since I was about 2. I think it and actually the sequencer software that I used like way early in my career, both came with my dad's very first Pentium PC in the early 90s. It was, I think Doom was like the first thing that he loaded onto it, just to see if it was working. Because of course, if it works, if it runs Doom, it works. Yeah. That was really like where I got my start. Was just I was introduced to this magical thing called the computer at a very early age, and I mean, obviously, needless to say, I was like pretty taken by it, like virtually like hypnotized by it as a kid. Yeah, and like here I am still today, obviously. So I can't imagine how different my life would be if I didn't have like video games, or if I didn't have, you know, music in general kind of just flowing in me, you know, because yeah, I don't know what other like paths I could have taken, really. There's a lot of different I suppose there's a lot of different things that kind of shaped me as a person, but I think video games have to be like the one thing that's like sort of kept me going and kept me being creative over the years. Because if there's anybody here tonight that doesn't know just how huge the Doom playing community still is today, I mean, it's immense. It's huge and vibrant and so creative. There's people from all walks of life still contributing to it today. Amazing content getting made, brilliant maps, brilliant music, brilliant just everything, really. There's so much cool stuff out there, and a lot of it is completely free to download as well. And I remember being like absolutely spellbound by this, even as a really young kid. Just being like, you know, amazed by the things that I was seeing people create in the online world, you know, using this very basic engine. And definitely that got the gears turning in my head on the creative side as well. So I was already like creating music at this stage. I think it took me a year or two to really entrench myself in the community and become like a name that was somewhat familiar. But then I started like publishing my music there, and that really started to like snowball. I kind of really found a real deep interest in that, in giving back to a community. I found that really, really spiritually quite lifting, I suppose. Just getting all this feedback from all these brilliant people. So that kept me going. And it kind of like mutated from there into like into me creating my own game as well. I've always been like so very deeply creative, like on a very internal level, creating just all these worlds in my head, all these things that I want to do, know that I will never do, which is always the way as a creative, I think. So many like project ideas coming out the wazoo, really, basically. But it didn't take me long to kind of like summon up the guts to say, okay, do you know what, we're gonna plow ahead and make a game. Like I'm gonna just see what I can do personally with my own skills, with my own existing skill set, and that's where Adventures of Square really originated. My sibling Bimmy originally came up, Ben, real name, came up with the initial idea for the character of Square. He was originally intended as a character that was just supposed to be some very nondescript, very kind of basic children's show type character with no real background or backstory, just a very, this guy is a square, he doesn't like circles, and he gets into all sorts of weird adventures. It's all this sort of stuff. So, and from there, it kind of just really kind of grew as a concept beyond that, which I'm really thankful that it did, because obviously that's a very, very basic beginning. It also became very involved as soon as I got like more people on board the project. So, and I think from there is where it started to get really serious, because as soon as I released that demo for Adventures of Square back in 2013, I suddenly had a flock of community people coming to me saying, "Hey, please involve me with this. This looks so cool." And it was really humbling, I suppose. And that's really what's kind of kept me going. The fact that I've got this sense of community going still today. It's just this. It's really quite magical. Like the power of the internet to unite creative minds in that sort of respect. I've always really, really enjoyed being part of the online Doom playing and modding community, and like still to this day, obviously, it's still going strong. Can't see it ending anytime soon. And yeah, I'm I'm excited to see where it goes as well.
It's rare that I get to talk to you like as a fan anymore because I just kind of hang out with you all the time in the Hellforge and stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you kind of brought to mind there for me was the original Doom soundtracks, as iconic as they are at this point, in as far as the Doom community, people who play classic Doom games and everything, I think at this point your name is kind of synonymous with that. Like everybody knows James Paddock, except Tony. Now
Nice
you know
to
him.
meet you.
I'm bringing minds together. I'm just gonna pick on Tony all day.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
But you were so like prolific and influential, and not just because people are just fans of your music, but because when they play Doom, any Doom mod or anything, and they look into like, well, what is this music? Even if it's not you, they're gonna come across your name, and you've kind of organically or whatever led this this ultra cool renaissance of MIDI music, and then there's people like Eris that are kind of following along here, and then not just the MIDI stuff, but then people who decided like, oh, I can make music for Doom mods, and then we ended up people like John, and we end up with people like Immorpher. We end up with all these amazing, wonderful people. And metal, totally coming from a totally different genre, stylistically, but still doing a very similar sort of thing with the Doom engine. It's very, very, very cool. I don't get to gush at you as much as I'd like to. I usually spend time saying like, "Fuck Jimmy."
Now, just on to that point, I mean, it's if nothing else, the Doom community is just a great conduit of sorts for greater opportunities, because we have like the industry professionals still hanging out with us today, like people like John Romero. He involves himself with the community every now and then. That's how Sigil happened, basically, for me. And then Lee Jackson as well, Rise of the Triad and Duke Nukem guy. He's been hanging around as well, like very closely on like some certain like discords for the Doom community, and it's just been awesome hanging out with him and just chatting stuff. And he's been like pressing me for like feedback and stuff like that, which is just such a mind-blowing thing, because I've loved Rise of the Triad soundtrack. I've always loved it, even as a kid. And then, here we are, something like 20 years after the game came out, more than that. And yeah, it's like, get to meet the guy, and he's like, man, this guy's a really good composer. I should seek out his feedback. It's so cool. It's just, I think, yeah, the community's really let me kind of grow in that regard and become this sort of figure that I guess, just trying to help people is just in my blood, really. And that's why I kind of find myself entrenched in so many different community projects, and why I find my name just so, spread so wildly across the community. I wouldn't trade it for the world, honestly.
Does anybody have any kind of questions or anything that they would like to pick on Jimmy about, specifically like the fact that you strictly work in the MIDI format? I think that's weird. It makes perfect sense for your career arc, but otherwise it's just like, what, as a musician or any musician out there, that's just like, this guy just does that. He's like making
well, yeah,
making
but
his way in the world.
I think
it's cool.
personally there is an art to creating good MIDI. It's a lot of people who, maybe just look on the surface of MIDI think it's just, oh, you just take a little pen and you're just drawing notes on bars and beats and things. And well, that's part of it. But then there's expressions. There's all the little nuances and things that you add to MIDI to make it sound more real. And that's where the skill lies. And for those folks who can actually do that with MIDI and make convincing sounding tracks out of it, that's a skill. Not just everybody can do that. So me, I think I would be probably the perfect example of someone who would have, like you said, it would be like, I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play all the instruments and would say, oh, MIDI, but I'm totally on board with MIDI, 100%.
Yeah,
It's great. There's so much stuff you can do with it, even as a real instrumentalist. I mean, you can literally program your whole rig off of MIDI triggers. So, I mean, without MIDI, music could be a whole lot different, I think,
Definitely,
as a format. So,
yeah, and MIDI is, as you said, is a bedrock for all the stuff that we do digitally these days. And one thing that I quickly learned when I started composing MIDIs is you have to be really careful of what instruments you choose and where. You can get a really cheesy, bad sounding MIDI quickly if
you
you
can
don't.
create, well, because it's to create like polyphonic situations that aren't possible.
Yeah,
And those sound funny. Like if you tried to do like a seven simultaneous notes on a neck of a guitar that would require some weird alien hand, it's just, you're going to hear it, your brain's going to go, that's not right. And so to know how to avoid those pitfalls, another skill.
And what throws a wrench into everything is depending what Doom port you play on. Back in the day, it used to be depending on what sound card you have. The MIDI sounds differently.
Yeah.
So Jimmy, does that ever drive you crazy? How do you handle that?
I think just the way that I handle it is that I just sort of suck it up. I just sort of say, you know what? If you want to use a weird sound font that makes my songs sound like they're being recorded through like some sort of weird cardboard tube, go ahead, because it's out of my jurisdiction.
Metal's gonna rewrite your whole soundtrack in the Delay Llama.
Yeah, there you go. Oh Lord. Jimmy, when you were originally writing your stuff, did you just kind of stick with the general MIDI palette, or did you actually use a Roland GS canvas? Or
I've occasionally branched out into GS stuff, but just generally speaking, I will just stick with the basic general MIDI stuff, because that's just a palette of sounds I'm very, very intimately familiar with, and you can squeeze a lot out of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it also seemed like, as the comment was brought in about the different sound cards, it seemed like that one was kind of the one that was the least apt to go crazy.
Yeah, Microsoft end up getting all their like sounds from Roland and to make that general one that's been bundled with Windows for a while, and I thought it was mixed excellently.
Yeah.
And if I'm playing Doom and I want to spice it up a little bit, I'll use a Roland SC55 imitator sound font because that's very close to what the Windows one was, but just that much better because Roland actually put that together instead of just handing it off.
Yeah,
I
actually gotta say that I'm. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Just a real purity to the general MIDI sound. Just it sounds so clean and just no nonsense. It's obviously not accurate sounding to like real instruments, but I think it's doing its darndest.
Yeah. I was gonna say I actually have like a SC55 on here right in my little shelf over here. I just turn that thing on whenever I'm like playing any sort of Doom mod that uses it. I'm just like, let me just turn that on. I bought it. I say I bought it because I wanted to use some of the sounds for my own compositions, but nah, really, I just bought it to play Doom.
Good choice, though. Good choice.
I'm just impressed that you all have these various sound cards and these various devices simply to play Doom in different ways. I think for me, that is what's blowing my mind at the moment.
Doom is the universal constant.
I mean, think about like if you just think about where gaming would be without, let's say Doom never existed. What would FPSs look like?
It's incredible.
Hover Tank 3D.
Probably Wolf 3D.
I mean, and the longevity. I think it's like I can't think of another game that has as much love and support still after all this time than Doom. And maybe I'm just naive, but it just seems to me that Doom is like the Rolling Stones. They're just never going to die.
Yeah.
No, Jimmy, when you started, like, what was it like trying to learn a MIDI software? Because, like, I look at your music and it's like you understand how to compose, but then we actually have to key it into the software when you first started. What was that like? Did you have to have any tricks to accelerate your learning?
I want to say yes, but the reality is that I was completely self-taught, and it was kind of a long road, I suppose. But I'm happy that I went down it. I had Cakewalk Express, as my first MIDI sequencer. It's like for Windows 3.1 and DOS. So yeah,
I still have
16-bit
Cakewalk
program.
3.1 discs.
I
Nice.
think Cakewalk recently went free now, some parts of it.
Yeah,
So
it did.
yeah, so you can relive that experience for free these days.
Yeah, I still have somewhere. I think the old exe file won't run on my machine. Of course, it's like at least not through like a VM or something else that's just some weird arcane magic to get a 16-bit program to even like think about running on 64-bit architecture. I remember actually trying to use it through a virtual machine for a good few years. And I'm so glad I stopped doing that because the input latency was so bad and the speed of the machine was just god awful. It was so clunky and bad. And yeah, and this is, and while I'm trying to stream it as well, just stream my composition work live on Twitch, it's just a disaster in the making, basically. So I'm happy they made the transition finally. I now use a sequencer called Sakaiju, which is a free piece of software that is everything that Cakewalk was and a little bit more. So yeah, I'm very happy to have jumped to a piece of software that was made this century or this millennium even.
So I said we were going to give everybody 10 minutes, and I think we just did 17. As this always happens, every time any conversation involves Jimmy, just like everybody just like, oh, I love you, Jimmy.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. We'll circle back around to you, but let's give Metal Neon his spot.
Thank you. So I guess for me, mostly how I started doing music for this type of stuff, like, I mean, I did music way before I started doing like just general composition and stuff, because I used to play like violin and oboe when I was like in middle school. Actually part of a jazz band for a little bit. That was pretty fun. But anyways, like years go by. I had like a band teacher who didn't really like me, so I didn't do music in high school. But effectively, during college, I ended up just I ended up taking some course or whatever. I think it was just for some elective credits or whatever. I'm like, I actually kind of want to do music now. I forgot I used to like this. Maybe I want to do this now instead of, slaving away doing programming for the rest of my life. So I'm like, yeah. And so basically over the course of that summer, I was just going through like a bunch of various DAWs, just screwing around until I found something I like. And I ended up settling on Reaper at the time, mostly just because it was very easy for me to understand as a beginner. And it allowed me to do a bunch of like, basically it just worked for what I needed, and it still works for what I need, at least right now. And I just fucked around with a bunch of like free VSTs and stuff, and that's just kind of like how I started. And honestly, for anyone who does want to start, that's like the best advice I can just give. Just start, just like download a couple like free VSTs, get like something like Reaper or something like that, and just screw around and just mess around. That's honestly the best way if you really just want to like get started. Of course, later on, I ended up actually taking a bunch of lessons from a local sound engineer in my area, who now he has like a mastering studio, which from what I've heard is actually doing pretty well. And he taught me like most of what I know regarding mixing. I remember his one tip he gave me was regarding EQ. If you wanted it to sound natural, you don't go more or less than 6 decibels. That was like a tip he gave me. I don't know if like that's like good advice, but that's just what he gave me.
Depends.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
Always depends with mixing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it depends. Everything depends.
Yeah, or yeah, or like other tips, like if you want like an SM57, if you want SM58, but you only have SM57, just like put a sock over it, and it'll sound mostly the same. That's one tip he gave me as well. Just put a sock over an SM57.
Just like the doorknob, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, he's not far from wrong though. Literally. 57s are a lot brighter than 58s. That's why you hardly see a lot of people using 57s for vocal mics. They use 58s. Use 57s on snares because they're so snappy.
Oh yeah, you just put a sock on it, and there you go. It's just now you have an SM58. But
Metal, you're a more interesting example because you're like kind of just now breaking into your first real production project, and
yeah,
this is a wide array of people who've done a lot of crazy shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like and what I was thinking about was that when you decided to go like I'm gonna go tackle this project for Waffle Iron,
mm-hmm.
did you have like an agenda that was like I'm gonna eventually end up doing this for a living, or was it just kind of an organic kind of process? Because I think we're gonna hear a lot of similar sort of stories.
I mean, truth be told, I always wanted to get into like doing music for stuff like I always wanted to be someone who was like known for doing a bunch of music, and I always wanted to start out like doing music for a project. And once I was given the opportunity to do so for Wallfire, and I was like, okay, this is my start. This is how I'm going to start doing that,
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, by that point when I joined Wallfire, and I've already been composing for like at least 2 years at that point, or like a year or two maybe. So I was like pretty experienced at the time. I was mostly just sticking to synthwave, but it was essentially once I got my hands on like a sampler VST is when I really started to like things started to really open up for me. I got like my hand, I think it was like a Korg M1 like VST. So, I mean, like memes of memes of the Seinfeld bass slap aside, it was it's been very helpful for my creative process just because of how many like ambient pads I can have and just making all these really cool like crazy ambient shit with it. It's not the best sounding thing in the world, but it has its own very unique character, and I still use it to this day just because it's like, it's like its own thing, and like the interface is excellent. It's really easy to sort through sounds and find what you need. I like it a lot. I swear I'm not sponsored by Korg, although if you want to hit me up, Korg. But yeah, I just kind of want to do this music mostly because how do I put it? I just want to, like, I'd love to make this like a living for me. If it doesn't work out, that's fine because I enjoy doing this in and of itself. But like, I really would love to like, be able to like just go around, make music for a bunch of people, even like outside of like stuff that Waffle Iron works on. Yeah.
Do the rest of y'all have any kind of tips and tricks for picking up things and how to market yourself for those sorts of things, or is it just kind of an organic, like whoever invites you project? Or
I think it depends on how aggressive you go about it and what you have to show as far as your previous work.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been, I think it's probably going to be the same whether you're in games or you're trying to sell to a label. Music is music. So the process of getting it out there is the same, I think. And
Right.
you just have to be aggressive. You have to be aggressive. You have to know what your product is and just lay it out there.
Yeah, and I'd say specifically for games, and I speak as someone who, I guess my first gig in the games industry was I was actually a senior in college, but I knew when I graduated that I'd be moving to Michigan to get married, so I was like, okay, I got to start finding work now before I even graduate. And literally, what I would do is at the time when I had more time, as a college student, in the middle of physics class or whatever I didn't care about, I was basically sending like 10 to 15 emails a day to various developers whose stuff I admired, saying, hey, I'm so and so, this is what my music sounds like. I obviously researched to make sure they didn't already have somebody, but if they didn't already have it clear that they had a composer, I would do this. And I think I hit about like 150 to maybe 200 emails before I got one reply saying, hey, we like it. So there's a certain aggressiveness to it, but there's also a long-term element as well play the long-term game of just getting to know people, getting to meet people, make friends. The last game I worked on that was released called The Ambassador Fractured Timelines, published by Quantum Astrophysicists Guild. That stemmed from a post.
Immorpher, are you part of that?
Oh, I did have to take plenty of quantum classes, so.
Yeah, but that game stemmed from, I kid you not, a forum post. The team was working on something many, many moons ago. I said, oh, I love this. We connected. 4 years later, they hired me. And so everything that I'm doing now, even the things that are not Call of Saregnar, are basically from connections of 2, 3, 4 years ago of just Twitter interaction, phone calls, you name it. And now they're at the point of, oh, well, now we can hire you. Now we have room for you to come on our team. So it's a long-term game. So kind of like what you were saying before,
super important.
Now. Yeah.
Like if you're not networking, you're not working. That's kind of in music. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like you try and shake everybody's hand, you try and meet everybody you can, and you get like just a few seconds to kind of tell them what you do, and it sticks in their brain if you were memorable. And like it was mentioned, they may not call you back for years.
Right.
But if you're not networking, you're not working.
I remember a story where Jack Nicholson was auditioning for movies, and they're like, we don't need you for this, but when we do need you, we will need you. And then people would just remember like that's that guy that did that thing that was like really, it just stuck in their brains, you know. And he was a very specific kind of actor. He was like not really an actor, he's Jack Nicholson, you know what I mean? Like he's not the Joker, he's Jack Nicholson. And Jimmy, you're puppy. Jimmy's a great example of this because it's like you know, I don't really need a guy who specializes in like kind of Doom style midis, but when John Romero decides to do the big epic sequel episode to Doom, well, I mean, who are you going to call? Not Ghostbusters. You're going to call James Paddock.
Yeah.
And Tony, that's a great point of view there. It's just like, yeah, definitely. The networking is everything. That's how I got to be interviewing you all right now. It's just, I don't know. Somebody somewhere remembered my name when they needed a guy who could interview boomer shooter musicians. Who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
Some things will happen overnight. I mean, I will say there will be moments. You're going to see people who will message some random developer, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll pay you $50,000 to do this gig," and you're going to be like, "Okay, how come that hasn't happened to me?" Yeah. But there also is a certain level of luck that's involved. Yeah. There's going to be people who get things that happen overnight, but your big thing that will happen to you may be a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or more down the line. So just be ready for the fact that there is a sense of, I don't want to say luck. I don't like the word luck. Yeah. But opportunity meets preparedness is essentially how this industry works.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's actually funny you say that. When I actually joined Waffle Iron initially, I wasn't even the composer for it. I was actually just came on as like a playtester essentially because they already had a composer at the time. But I think like I think I was just like I was like playing through like a game or whatever. I was like showering, I think. And I'm like, I just came up in my head with like this concept for like one of the boss musics. I'm like, yes, I need to fucking do this. And so I got like all my shit down and I put that in, and like the team was impressed with it to the point where they're like, okay, we're just hiring you to do the soundtrack at this point. Like
wow.
I mean, that was not the only reason they dropped the other musician, but no bad blood against him. He's a cool dude, but I basically just replaced him.
We know what you're trying to say.
Why is it that all the best ideas come when you're in the shower?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Actually.
Always.
Yeah, why is that? If they could come up with a device, literally, they could just plug into your head and record everything that you like. Because I have come up with some of the most epic songs in the shower, and it's like you just can't get into the studio fast enough to start getting stuff down before it literally falls apart and becomes something terrible. Whoever can come up with that, billion-dollar idea.
No, what we need is like a device that's like you can just write shit down while you're in the shower. So you just like are like, oh man, yeah, I know I'm gonna do it, and I'm just like put it in the shower, and then I take it back to my back to where I am right now, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna put that shit in, and there we go.
So we already kind of like got onto Tony's tangent here, so we might as well just spend the next few minutes picking on him.
Yeah, sure.
So you and I have a special relationship, as you know.
With Dina. We have a special relationship with Dina.
Dina has many quarters. So it's just been truly great getting to work with you and Damian and Ben. It's like this is my first really like foray into game development at all, and I'm really stoked that we're like making that kind of more public here with Realms Deep and everything. But you're again, it's kind of the same thing I said to Jimmy. Like, well, who can do like badass classical tracks, solo without go? And I was gonna say without an orchestra, but we did record. You did do like the main title with the Budapest Orchestra.
Yes, Budapest. Yep.
What the hell? Tell us everything. This is weird. This is unfounded. It all
started when I was born. No, I'm just kidding. So I did record the main theme for Call of Saregnar with the Budapest Scoring Orchestra, based in Budapest, obviously, and I'm planning on doing a couple other tracks for the game, like the more special tracks in the game with them, because they did a great job. But yeah, so it's hard to, how can I condense this into 7 minutes? The biggest thing for me is I've always been a huge fan of orchestral sounds, orchestral music. I don't want to say orchestral video game music or orchestral film music or orchestral classical music, because I think in a way it all kind of feeds into each other. And I would even go so far as to say I've always enjoyed seeing bands play. Like when Metallica played with an orchestra, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And there's some of the, you can find the videos on YouTube. I mean, there's just something about the orchestra that I have always been in love with. And so, when Jimmy mentions, MIDI data and sort of expression and getting that stuff to blend, and we were talking about, okay, the chord has a certain character. My brain operates in a way of, okay, what does a clarinet sound like in unison with, a viola, right? I'm always thinking about in lines of the more acoustic textures, which actually can be very hard to mix and replicate in a DAW. I mean, I would say that virtual orchestration is like 90% EQ, because every orchestral instrument literally sits in the 500 hertz range, like every single one.
Yeah.
Unless it's a piccolo, right? So there's so much. People are like, how much do you EQ? I'm like, you'd be surprised. The rule of like, don't go more than 6 dB. I'm like, if you collectively look at all my EQ moves over the course of the piccolo one, and then the flute, and then the flute's group, and then the woodwinds group, I'm like, I'm cutting a bunch, like all over the place. But all very subtle moves that end up adding up together. Because when you have, some of my projects for Call of Saregnar, like the actual project files, sometimes I literally have between 150 and 200 tracks, because there's group. If you lump in aux sends and groups and all that stuff together, mixing orchestral music is probably still where I greatly need to grow. Because again, I'm coming from a place of, I know how to write on sheet music or my digital notation, hand it over to an orchestra, and someone can conduct it and someone can play it. Great, fantastic. But then when I started having to do that on my own in terms of a digital reproduction of sorts, the mixing stuff and all of that was when I was like, wow, I really need to dive into this. So when I started with Call of Saregnar back in 2017, 2018, obviously I still needed to make income as well elsewhere. So I started that soundtrack, but was always kind of doing stuff on the side. And through all of that other stuff, I was like kind of getting better at mixing and really understanding virtual orchestration, so to speak, that now in 2021, I guess I kind of started 2018 with that, really. Now in 2020, I'm going back to all those earlier tracks and basically redoing them. New sample libraries, new everything. It's taking me an arm and a leg in terms of time, but it's going to be a better product at the end of the day. And so, I don't know. So that's sort of my thing, is that it's I love the classic. I think of counterpoint, and I think of my compositions not as like production or like what effects can I use, but what kind of counterpoint can I use and what kind of orchestration can I use? And that's sort of how my brain works. And then trying to figure that out through the digital orchestration is certainly the challenge, because sometimes things that translate well in an acoustic setting don't translate well in a digital space. And so you have to kind of puzzle solve that. That's a long-winded answer, but that's my thing, I guess. I don't know.
You're again, each person here is very like special in my heart. You're all special and unique little angels, and you all do something that's just totally mind blowing. And that's why I wanted to like take an opportunity. This is a time when we have to showcase. We all have games coming out and everything. And like, let's get together and just see what happens. What happens when we take the classical guy and the synthwave guy and the actual boomer, not boomer shooter guy, but the actual boomer over here, and we take the MIDI dude and we take fucking whatever it is that John does, and then we take the hellscape that is Immorpher, and like what would happen. And this is, we're only like 50 minutes in, but this is like I'm learning so much.
Technically, I'm a Gen X.
Okay, well,
and can I ask Tony one question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you do the mix for the main theme yourself? Like,
I did not mix that. No.
ooh.
I hired them to mix them only because I've never mixed live orchestra with all, like, when you're talking like, okay, the room mic and then flute one, but like a live orchestra, it's very different when I'm used to the sample libraries and I know the quirks and I know how to kind of piece things together. But when it's a live orchestra that's freshly recorded in a room I've never even been in physically, or even like mixed anything in, I forget what the hall they use to record it in. I forget what the name it is. But so no, I did not mix. I did a mastering job on it because that's a little bit easier than mixing a full like a live recorded orchestra. That's kind of out of my wheelhouse at this stage. But sample libraries is very different because you have direct control sort of while you're creating the music.
Right.
It's not like, here's the thousands of files and have fun. It's like, okay, now I can kind of oh, I'm going to actually use the tree mic here or the close mic here because it'll enhance the composition, So great question. And I wish I did a better job in terms of that front, but that again would have been so out of my wheelhouse. That's like, it's its own skill.
I remember back in the day, to use a digital audio workstation to compose, let's say, a full orchestra. It was a nightmare because back in the day, you did not have enough RAM to do it. Your hard drive would be exploded. And then to have all those layers, you didn't have enough processing. I imagine now these days it's much better.
Yeah, well, the sample library that I use is the Berlin Symphonic series by Orchestral Tools primarily. I also use East West Hollywood strings just for Call of Saregnar specifically. It just matches the tone of the game. But the Berlin, I just built this PC basically, and this has 128 gigs of RAM because if I use 100% of the Berlin series, I max out at like 100 gigs. It's insane.
All these Doom MIDI guys and everything just like had a stroke when you said that.
I run 80. I have 80 gigs in mine.
I
have to run 80, so you have to run a lot of RAM to do high-end mixing. I mean, like even a rock track ends up at about 48 to 60 tracks.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's
well, you
wild.
got doubles of guitars, doubles of vocals. There's
all the drums.
Yeah, the drums and the cymbals and just the different room mics and overhead mics and snare mics and underhead mics. And snare drum's got like 2 mics on it. The kick's got like 3 mics on it. Yeah, so you're at 48, 60 tracks by the time you're all done.
I have like a friend who's in a very similar situation to you, where he literally has like a computer with 128 gigs of RAM just because he does a bunch of orchestral stuff and like on his stuff. I think he has like a 16-core processor too. Like literally the only part of his computer that isn't beefed out right now is his graphics card, but that's just because he's kind of waiting to get a new one. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's and that's I got the 10900K i9, which is again also necessary. I had an ancient thing that I was struggling to make things work. So I really needed to upgrade. But I want to touch on actually like general MIDI. So I'm actually working on another game called Evercraft Online. So it's going to be kind of stylized in terms of gameplay, kind of like EverQuest and RuneScape, like the early 2000s MMOs.
Mm-hmm.
And the developer wants the music to sound like general MIDI. And so here, when I first started making the soundtrack, I was very much like, okay, orchestra is, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, and it did not translate well. It was actually quite a relearning experience and a lot of listening to be like, oh yeah, they really limited this down to, you may have a low strings, a high strings, a woodwind, right? To make it more that sparse, I guess the word would be like a sparser texture, a more sparse texture, versus when I'm just used to like, I'm doubling instruments with other instruments and making this huge sound. It's been quite a learning experience to kind of replicate the general MIDI stuff. And I obviously don't have all the super fancy hardware. I'm just using the Roland Sound Canvas VST instrument, which is actually really cool.
I agree.
But it's been very interesting to listen and to identify, okay, yeah, there's actually not a lot of traditional doublings as what I would normally do in my acoustic orchestration.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very
Sorry, Tony. Yeah, the thing about like MIDI is that I think it does have its own sound. It is a very stripped back thing compared to a full ensemble of like real instruments with their own sort of rich textures and upper harmonics and everything. Those instruments can like fill a room with sound, a very powerful sound. And then MIDI is kind of just its own sort of thing. So
Right.
its own little bleeps and bloops, and like you've got like every like from what I've heard of like RuneScape's music, I never really played it, but it is a very like stripped back kind of approach. I mean, hell, in MIDI you have, one of the instruments is string ensemble, which is just everything that it's not a full string ensemble. Clearly, it's just one sound, one patch. But that covers most bases. Honestly, just that one sound alone, honestly, still feels, even though it's just the one sound, it still feels quite full.
Well, we were also limited back then to the amount of voices we could use at one time.
16.
Early on it was like 8 voices and then 16. And then I remember when we got 32 and it was like, whoa, we got 32, and then 64. And, now we're just about unlimited. I mean, well, almost. But yeah, I mean, so a lot of the music that, that defined kind of what the general MIDI sound was due to that 8 and 16 voice limit.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny though, because if you even go to the technicalities of that, even some of the sounds that you could get from them actually took up 2 voices instead of 1. So sometimes it was often even less than the advertised one. Like for my
yeah,
sound
because they would have like
yeah.
one voice assigned to the actual like DSP, which was pre-DSP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like on my
That's
sound
crazy.
canvas.
Or the
for
MIDI
instance-
zero
yeah.
controller channel.
Yeah, like for instance, like Ancient Aliens, like that Doom mod, like the soundtrack for that will constantly cause my sound canvas to just keep skipping notes and stuff because there's just too much polyphony going on. At least with like my actual sound canvas. I've heard like the sound canvas VA actually has more polyphony than the regular one.
It does.
And
Yeah.
so I don't get that many problems with that. But like so you have to like really keep in mind with a lot of these like polyphony type stuff when you're actually composing for things like MIDI.
And two, and we're okay. I didn't mean to like cut everybody off and interrupt, but we all have to go pee at some point, and that was my moment. So I do want to continue on with like before we get into the real like just everybody go crazy moments. Like let's get through our other 2 guests. You know, they took their time to be here. And Immorpher, I think you're next. You're another example of like don't always need that, but when I need it, we know who to call. And you're that guy for dark ambient beauty, wonderful, hellscape-ish. Like if Beksinski made music, it would be yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's having this kind of effect on people. I didn't know when I first started doing it what would happen. Growing up, it won't be a surprise to anyone that knows me and my music. I didn't like music when I was a little kid. It wasn't until video games that I really started liking music, and specifically the Nintendo 64 of Aubrey Hodges' ambient soundtracks, and his soundtracks are actually using the N64 MIDI synthesizer. They just has a custom sound font using that. So then for many years after, I didn't actually play many games anymore. The gaming had moved on to a more general audience, and I didn't like music until I started listening to metal. Then I got into death metal and things like that. And when I made my first MIDIs, I would try to make death metal MIDIs, and you can listen to them out there. They're pretty intense. And then after a few years went by, I would listen to these dark ambient N64 soundtracks, sometimes the Quake PC soundtrack, which is ambient as well. And eventually, after you listen to these things so much, you kind of it's old hat. You start anticipating what was now random. You can now predict it, and now it's no longer becoming ambient anymore. So I was like, oh man, I really need more of this music. And it just wasn't out there. There was dark ambient music, but it was of a different style, because these days you don't have to work in like a MIDI restrictions or anything like that. I was thinking in my head, how am I going to do this? I was going to do a procedural generated MIDI program, but then looking into MIDI and the format at the time, it was just above my head, just going to those bytes. But so I was like, okay, actually, I know what I can do. So I have my normal career as a scientist. I was trained as a physicist. I learned how to program, and I learned how to do signal processing, just taking in oscillating voltages, processing them, and analyzing them. I was like, hey, I could just make my own synthesizer out of that. So I started programming in the software called MATLAB or Matrix Lab, and that's what proves me as a scientist, because you wouldn't want to program a synthesizer in that software unless you were a scientist that knew how to use that. It's not meant to do that at all. It doesn't have any real-time audio on it, so I have to write it to export right to a file. And so I started doing that. I started doing what I knew about signal processing, and then I was like, okay, how do kind of natural sounds behave? And I was thinking like how they evolve, and how there's always slight nuances to natural sounds. So I was like, I want to program that into my synthesizer. So I draw like a waveform, and I can have that waveform gradually evolve in any of the points, any of the interpolations over time. And then I did my own bit cruncher, which is easy, just quantize the bits. I did my own distortion. I figured out how to do a reverb. I was listening to those impulse responses, and I was like, oh, they sound a lot like gunshots. And I was like, okay, let me do that. And for those who don't know, an impulse response is if you just like do a click and then you listen to what comes back. That's the response. And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. So I would generate noise, and I would sequentially filter and filter and filter more frequencies out. And then then I would convolute it with my sound, and there I made my own reverb. And eventually I was programming all these things in, and I had so many different parameters that it became too much for me to just manually handle. So what I do with my synthesizer is I set it to go through all kinds of random permutations overnight. Next morning, I listen to all the dumbass garbage it produces. And then eventually, me being me, I want the most nasty, the most horrible, disgusting sounds. And it's like, oh, there's something there. So then I had to learn mixing quite quickly. I mean, I did a little bit of metal production back, just amateur, very basic stuff. So I was like, okay. So I knew enough about mixing that I could kind of start hammering them to shape. Then I start layering them up in like Adobe Audition. I mean, my DAW of choice is FL Studio, but if I really want to get in the nitty gritty of the audio, I need to do it in Adobe Audition and just start layering up and filtering it. And I just programmed certain principles of how I felt like ambient music should behave, and that is it's supposed to be representative of an environment. So there are certain principles, like if I think of something living like a flock of birds, if one bird chirps, then you have a sequence of birds chirping. And in music, that's just basically like programming a delay in there. So I have a delay that does bounces, and as it bounces, I have it adjusting the reverb of how that reverb keeps on building up on it as it bounces. And I just all programmed that in there. And because I'm doing it in the software, it's not the most efficient. Luckily, I don't have to buy 128 gigs of RAM because it's just writing to files. Now it's going to kill my hard drives over time because I'm constantly reads and writes and deletes. Because most of the stuff it produces is like a big mountain of dead bodies. Most of it's garbage, and I just bury it and then I just take that corpse at the top, the most disgusting one, put some makeup on it, and just layer it into those tracks.
Oh, I love that description. I love that. You got to use that somewhere. Like, if you ever describe the way you make music, you should just say, I make a disgusting pile of corpses that I just bury right before I cherry pick the grossest one off the top.
Literally,
that's
really good thing I was recording. Like, if you had said that when we were taking a break, I would have been really pissed. I was like, no, write it down.
Like, anyone that talks to me, I have an unusual taste in music. I mean, Chris Holden kind of understands a little bit because we're both into this old school, just really nothing nice about it, death metal, But then when, let's say, like any other, like Major Arlene or Bridgewater shares their songs, and there's like happy, let's say, major chords in it. I'm like, ugh, I don't want major chords in this.
Exactly how I feel.
Why is there major chords in this? Why are you clean singing? I don't want that. It's not disgusting enough. And so I found, so it's basically like a niche that I was like, okay, I want to make music here. I just want to do what I want because I love my career as a scientist. I'm not looking to be a musician. So Middle Neon, whatever I'm doing, do the opposite of. Because I'm just doing a very, very niche thing because I really enjoy it. It's actually very therapeutic because if I'm having all these angsty feelings, always think of those sappy songs that people listen to when sad. Well, I put all these weird ass thoughts that I have into these tracks. And then it becomes a creative thing. It doesn't take over me. It becomes a little like creative, like it's there. That's what it is. It's there. And I can listen to it when I want to. I can walk away when I want to. Yeah, and then I just what happened was I started sharing it around the Doom community and the Quake community. I didn't know what people would think of it at first because it was taking such a weird approach. I didn't know if they wanted to use it, and it ended up being the Quake community that really took hold of it. Apparently, unbeknownst to me, Dump Truck is a major dark ambient fan, and so then he really hopped onto it. JCR, who's at 3D Realms now doing projects, end up putting one of my tracks, using my tracks for the first time, and it's also appearing in some Doom projects now. Like one of the early ones was Hurt by Elend. He used one of my ambient tracks, and some of them will appear in Dead Tech. So it's like, wow, there's a community of weirdos out there just like me who appreciate this weird ass shit, and I've been happy ever since.
I mean, I heard you first on the QuakeCast. I'm a huge QuakeCast fan. I've gone on record many times, like the best podcast about boomer shooters is the QuakeCast, not in the Keep. And
There's debate out there, but yeah, both. I love Dump Truck. I love you, and these have been great for the community.
But when I heard your interview on that show, I was like, this motherfucker gets it. Like I just, I heard you having a conversation with someone else that I peripherally knew, and I was like, we're gonna be best friends immediately. Like you've been so cool, man. Like I've featured so much of your music in the show. I've just completely fallen in love with what you do because there's no one else who does it. I mean, Aubrey had his run doing that, but like also you're not doing NFL soundtracks.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you kind of took his basic architecture,
the feeling, his emotion
he laid down, and you just ran with it. And
the way I ended up programming it, I mean, that was my inspiration, but then it ended up kind of existing somewhere between the Doom 64, the Quake 64, and Quake. Just the way method of how I programmed it, because it was no longer just pure MIDI anymore. Yeah. And part of it is my own selfish reasons because like I release all my stuff for free. Anyone can use it, commercial, non-commercial. That's because like I make enough money as it is for right now. And if I lose my job in the future, I'll come say, hey guys, I need some change in my cup.
You'll have a lot of people who owe you too.
But it's mostly because I love playing these games, and it's my way of influencing people. Like, oh yeah, if they use my music, they're going to make games of the mood that I like. So that's why I say, like, if you use my track, just let me know, because I think I'm going to like what you're making.
Oh, that was beautiful, man. You're a very well spoken individual. It's kind of intimidating.
You wouldn't believe it, my Finnish heritage, right?
I mean, we just reveal, not in real time, people who are watching this, but we just released the Smile Scythe episode, and that was like, can you fucking take a compliment, you son of a bitch? Like, let me tell you that I think you're great for like 5 minutes, and then just say thank you at the end of it.
Yeah.
Because he's just like, oh no, I'm not great in any way. Like, just fucking take the compliment.
Well, if you ask my wife, I'm not very talkative normally, but if you get on something that I'm very interested in, I would go on for hours and hours. And just music production and just weird shit is what I'm into. So,
all right, let's move along now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We'll all have our time to kind of dote on each other, but not me. John, I've saved you for last on purpose. What are you not working on? You are the hardest working man in show business. You're the Zach Wilde of video games. What the fuck, man?
I don't know what to say. I just get myself out there. I go very carefully. I see a project that looks really good. I'm like, I got ideas for this. I want to approach them and talk to them about it. And sometimes it works. So. And then once my name started getting out there, some people have started coming to me. So, just I don't know.
I'm on record many times. I'm like, look, people talk. There's the legends of the industry. There's your Lee Jacksons and your Jimmys and your like. In modern times, like there's your Marquis and your Andrew Holschultz, and I'm just like, dude, Primeval. That motherfucker needs to be getting paid right now. People are sleeping on you if they're not hiring you to do their project. And every moment that goes by, like every 2 seconds that passes, set your watch to it. If you're not hiring him, someone else is. And like, what the fuck? How are you doing it? It's so amazing.
That's so funny because Primeval and I have probably known each other roughly for about maybe a couple of years now. Because Primeval did some ambient influence stuff. Few years ago, was that the Innocence X? I think it was, right?
Yeah, Innocence X3 by Jazzmaster.
Yeah,
very Doom 64 influenced.
Yes, right. So my obsession goes no bounds, and I found it, and I immediately bought it, and I'm like, why? And then I listened to his other stuff, and I was like, this was years ago, and I was like, why don't people know about Primeval? Because he's like Andrew Holschultz or Marquee Music. And he was like, just, they didn't know back then. So we probably can go through our Discord DMs. I'm like, there's probably like 3 billion projects. I'm like, because there's something like, oh, they want a musician. And of course, I only do one thing because I want to do that. I'm not very flexible because I just do what I like doing. But I was like, oh, but I know Primeval can do it. So there's in our Discord, I probably sent him like 5 billion projects, and he's on all of them now. And then even a year ago, he's on these projects, and he was still not. I was like, why don't people know about him even more than you? So I think only now that because now he has a Kako award now that people are getting the plot.
You're just a fucking money making machine. I look at you, I'm like Vince McMahon, like I smell money. Like
fresh cash.
Yeah, it's only been just this past year that I've been sort of getting out there now with actual like independent games and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, and some of them, Immorpher helped me get into, like Libre Quake or Nail and Crescent, which is a RTX fan sequel of Quake for the Quake RTX engine.
It's looking at that Nail and Crescent of the updates. Like at first, if you think of the scope of it, they won't be able to do it. But man, they are doing it. You guys just wait.
Yeah. So.
But you go ahead.
Go on.
Yeah.
Oh no,
no, it's rare that you actually speak. I want you to do so. Like,
I don't know. I started to lose my train of thought there. So go ahead.
So, okay, you have a really diverse kind of array of the music that you create. I mean, primarily, I would say you do metal. That's what you're known for, at least, especially with the Bastion of Chaos stuff, and that's what I'm most familiar with. I'm just coming from like a very limited, like little pinpoint view. And how did you get into music? Like, what was your path into this thing? What influenced you? What made you say, I'm going to go pick that up? Because you said earlier when we were talking, like, you don't really play the guitar or anything. You're just doing all this stuff digitally. But did you have a spark, a moment that said, like, that's what I'm going to do?
Well, I was born to 2 metalhead parents, so I was raised on metal almost all my life. And my dad has always been in the band, so because of that, I've always wanted to make music one way or another.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up picking up the keyboard, this Yamaha keyboard I always played on for the longest time. And I've played video games all my life, and that's just the music that always stuck with me. So metal and video game soundtracks from Doom and Quake and Twisted Metal and all that stuff. And it just kind of clicked with me, I guess. I don't know. Once I actually started recording something on a computer, it all just, I don't know, just clicked together. I'm not sure how to explain it any further.
You're the worst kind of interview, you know that?
Like, I know. I'm.
Yeah.
I don't speak very much.
It's hard because I know there's so much in there. It's like this, like I'm just like gotta chisel away to try to get it, find it. No, that's fine. That's what I do. I'm a professional interviewer, as you can all tell by the copious amount of beer cans laying around and everything. But dude, you've got to acknowledge that there's this creative force behind you, and I feel like it's in there, but you're too humble, right? It's not like Jimmy where he's just braggadocious the whole time, like, oh yeah, I did all this. I'm kidding.
Yep, that's me.
What about this? Like, okay, so you're working on Age of Hell, you're working on Doombringer, you're working on several different Doom mods that I've just I'll just be hanging out with people. And they show me a random Doom mod. I'm like, oh, cool. Who's doing the soundtrack? Primeval. I'm like, what? Okay. Is he doing that on top of all the other shit? They're like, yeah. And then like 5 minutes later, the same thing will happen. I'm just like,
I get around.
He's like the Corey Taylor, of the metal world.
The point of this whole panel is to like anybody out there who's like interested in learning how to do what you guys do to, hopefully pick up some knowledge. Like, how do you network? What is your process? What do you, like, are you just
this kind of stuff, get involved in anything that gets you in the room with other like-minded musicians, because, sharing knowledge is great. I mean, I learned so much from having conversations with other musicians. We all have our own different techniques, our own different ideas, and you pick little things up. And so I think you just always got to be looking to talk to people who are like-minded. And it's I guess it's harder nowadays, with everything kind of limited socially to find folks like that. But situations like this are fantastic when they come up. So get involved.
Oh yeah. I mean, not much else I can say, as everyone else has said it already, much better than ever I could articulate. So
No, we're not gonna let you get off the hook that easy.
oh, I'm aware of that.
You got to do your time, bro.
Okay.
I do
let's
have
try a
like
different approach.
I do have a quick question for John. Being that he and I have been involved in the same community for a few years now. John, did you kind of view your beginnings in the Doom community as a sort of pivot to what you are doing now, or do you see them more as a kind of like, because I don't see you terribly active like doing like any MIDI stuff like you used to these days, which is all like fine and dandy. I'm just wondering if you consider yourself to have moved on from MIDI stuff towards that sort of realm of like full streamable audio.
Yeah, I think I had sort of moved on from just pure MIDI at this point, though I would like to revisit that era and just make some more MIDI stuff or maybe some classic Doom and whatnot. But at the moment, I just really enjoy working with all my VSTs and synths and whatnot. So
because I really definitely enjoyed being part of those projects that you and I were definitely involved with. Reverie back in the day, that was like 2011 was like great fun. You and I actually collaborated on a track with Stuart Rinn, didn't we?
Yeah, Map 27.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Bound for Glory.
Yep, that's it. Fond memories of that.
Track. Yeah, that came out so well. I was really happy. Like, I
because
find
you
the
two worked on it.
collaboration is I find collaboration to be one of like the better ways of meeting people in the musical world. Like to just reach out to people and just if they say yes, that's just a brilliant way to get to know them a little bit better. To know what makes them click, to know what their musical approach might be, to see how you gel with them on a sort of professional basis as well. But you and I go back like to easily 2011, perhaps beyond, perhaps even before that. I'm not entirely sure, but I've been in the community since 2006. So
wow,
yeah,
I came around 2008, I think. So my actual first gig was for Arcadia Demade, and I had no idea that guy. Yeah, I no idea that guy was actually part of the original BioShock team. So
isn't that weird when you talk to someone about a particular project and then you realize like that they did something else that was like, what?
Yeah,
because that happens to me all the fucking time. That happened when I had Dragonfly on the show, right? Like I brought him on for Ev Eternity, and I didn't realize he was working on Proteus. I was like, oh, what? Like and it's like an everyday occurrence. Just like how, and you're like, to keep on topic a little bit here, like John, you're just like one of those guys. How many places can he show up? But one of the things that you said earlier was that you kind of grew up on heavy metal and stuff, and like, what were the bands that were like resonating with you? Because I would some of your more popular stuff, I would say at this point, specifically talking about what's featured in what will be Age of Hell, is like kind of the symphonic metal mix. And I'm wondering, is there a particular influence to that, or just in general, what do you love music wise?
I was raised on a lot of Slayer and Sepultura, death.
Love Sepultura.
A lot of like thrash and like old school death metal, and then like towards the late '90s, I started getting into like progressive and symphonic metal, like Symphony X or something.
Yeah.
So that sort of leaks into it. Yeah.
Is it
and
Paul Gilbert? No, I'm thinking Racer X, not Symphony X. But yeah.
Yeah, and then started getting to.
Are you thinking of King's X?
There's too many X's. What about the band X?
I know there was.
Everybody like X.
Well, there was King's X. They were good too.
I like X-Men. They're pretty cool.
There you go. And
Music panel for Realms Deep is sponsored by the letter X.
Yeah. Well, we could have a 45-minute Kiss conversation.
We did that yesterday. Let's just people tune into the Foamy one for the Kiss discussion.
And then a lot of my orchestra like inspiration comes from like Hollywood movies and whatnot, like Jurassic Park or even like Godzilla movies. I love Akira Ifukube, if I even pronounce that right. And yeah, just love that stuff. And Midnight Syndicate has been a major influence on my orchestra and gothic tones. So
I got a question for Primeval. So, and this is someone again, because I also think in VST land. I also think in orchestral VST land. How does one authentically grasp making metal strictly from VSTs? If you don't play guitar, right? I think all the other like sort of metal or rock composers for games that I know almost always play drums, guitar, bass, or all of the above, right? So how do you approach in thinking as how do you approach writing for metal guitar when you don't actually play guitar? That's kind of what I'm asking.
it comes around from when I used to watch my dad play a lot. I just see how it works that way, how his hands move, what
Okay.
notes he would play. And then this recently, something called Shreddage 3 was released a few years ago, and it shows you what is being played, what's string, and it shows you like what's possible. Like you can't have two notes too close together at a lower range or anything like that, and just it's very intuitive, and I think that helps a lot with metal writing.
Okay.
So,
There's
Very
a
cool.
a thing about the electric guitar in general, especially when it comes to metal music. I think, in that the most featured note is always the lowest note on the guitar, whatever it happens to be, whatever tuning you're in. You know, the most popular one being like drop D or whatever. Um, we're not all going to be like Dwayne Allman, playing a slide guitar and like really experimenting with all these crazy different keys. The key that you're playing in is often very much rooted in whatever that lowest root note is on the electric guitar. And when you compose music that is not played on the guitar but is replicating that instrument, it can be very easy to kind of stray away from that. It can be easy to like kind of invent something that wouldn't naturally occur based on the way that most guitar players actually play the instrument. And that can lead to both like weird sounding things and also very interesting things. And that, you're not hearing someone actually playing guitar. One of the things about your stuff that you've done so far that just really fascinates me is that it all sounds very natural. And is that something that even occurred to you, or is it just rock and roll, see what happens?
I try to keep it as believable as possible. Maybe not as realistic, but I always try to play in that lowest note that's tuned to, or I adjust it accordingly, and just the engine just helps me out with that a lot, I think.
Because your average death metal guitar player is playing like D, and then everything on on the pentonic scale of D. And if they want to play a song in a different tune or in a different key, they have to retune the guitar because they're not going to play it any differently.
Yeah.
Right.
I did a hack of my guitar because I have a 7-string and I set up to C standard, so I just have to move one string up, then I can get the normal tuning.
This is blowing my mind, for the record. I know nothing about it. I've never played one. In fact, fun secret, I try to avoid writing for guitar when I can because it's so not natural. I play the organ. That's what I do on the weekends. I play the organ. I'm Mr. Bach over here.
Here you go, Tony.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Here's the guitar.
there's a guitar.
Here's a guitar, right? And the way that metal guitar players play is you have open, you have 1, 5, 3, maybe 6, and then variations on the next string because they're all automatically tuned because they play in a drop tuning. And
That's
then everything
wild.
beyond that is just like big brain shit. But the average metal guitar riff is always the same thing.
That's crazy.
It is so systematic. And I mean, it's like the blues, like you have the blues scale and you play the blues and there's no variation from that scale really. It's just a matter of your style within that. And if you want to change key, like listen to Boston, right? The whole first Boston album, every fucking song is in the same key because they're replicating the same kind of thing. It's like Taco Bell, you put a little sour cream over here, and you mix it up a little bit, a little cheese, a little beef, a little chicken. And the sky's the limit as far as what you can do with those basic ingredients. But
that's crazy. Yeah, metal guitar playing is I think that's the thing is like when I hear it, I know that's metal. That's what. But I've never logistically sat down with someone who does it and say like, how do you make that sound, right? Because again, I think in terms of horizontal counterpoint, right? I think in terms of notes and like sheet music. I don't think in terms of what a metal good. So this is mind blowing. I'm just fascinated. basically.
I have a couple of like kind of boring answers for Tony's question, which is that the way that I basically try and like learn how to write for an actual instrument is just to listen to a lot of it, listen to a lot of heavy metal, and just see, you know, what do guitar players just generally lean towards that might be just the most straightforward thing to play. The other way I do it is just to look up, you know, MIDI tablature online and just, you know, see this is how it's laid out, and then I kind of like try and take that on in my own mind and just say, so if I was a guitar player, how would I want this spelled out for me? And how would this melody like work if I was to spell it out? Is this a good melody in terms of being playable, in terms of being, you know, human compatible, I suppose. Of course, there is the other direction that I go, which is to say, you know, I'm just writing in just basic MIDI, so what's the point of humanizing it when I could just go full ham, and just have at it. There's a lot of brilliant MIDIs by some of the older musicians, or I should say the more seasoned musicians in the Doom community. People like Mark Clem, David Shaw, Jeremy Doyle. They're the old guard as far as MIDI compositions in the Doom fan community are concerned. And their MIDIs are clearly not meant to be played by humans. Like the guitars and the drums are so full layered. They're doing impossible stuff, like super fast, you know, runs up and down. The percussion section is so heavy duty. There's like all these like demi semi quaver runs and all this sort of stuff where it's borderline virtuosic, but it's so obviously intended to be played back by a computer. And I think that's a really neat and like quite niche aesthetic that might be lost on a couple of people. Some people might just view it as, oh, it's just MIDI notes just whizzing past you really fast. But I think there is a real sense of compositional virtuosity there that shouldn't go ignored.
I have a question for the two of you, Jimmy and Tony. As composers, and this probably applies more to you, Tony, than it does to Jimmy, but like I think both of you kind of will probably have an insight on it. So if you compose something that is physically impossible for a single human being to do, like Wagner did this when he would like write these insane bass parts that required two people to play, literally the giant double bass. Do you think that adds or subtracts from the music? Is there a human element that is more or less valuable than the potential array of sounds that you can kind of tackle and create?
I think it ultimately depends on what you're shooting for. If you're shooting for a piece of music that is trying to be as expressive as possible, if it's trying to say something that a human possibly couldn't say, then I say go for it. You know, just put all the notes down. You know, put like a fast demi semi quaver arpeggio on a big fuck off contrabass. You know, that is gonna piss off your orchestra, but it's gonna probably sound cool to you. You know, I think So like, I will say, having written 4 orchestral ensembles before as part of my university degree, humanization of music is very, very important, and it shouldn't be lost sight of if you're trying to aim for that sort of thing. You should say, you should be upfront with your orchestra that you want to cooperate with them and you want them to be happy playing your piece. But that's not to say you shouldn't make what you're doing kind of a bit challenging and like as expressive as possible, just to get across the message and the tonality and the feeling that you're trying to convey. That's a really important balance to strike. I don't know whether Tony feels the same way about writing his parts and his like sheet music for orchestra, but that's how I felt it.
Right. I mean, I think if you're going to be physically working with real musicians, because I come from a very, again, classical background of that's all I did for a while was working with live musicians. And you have to make it practical. You want to make it playable if you're going to be working with someone who's actually going to play it, right? I can't tell you how many performers have like griped about, oh, well, so and so composer made this impossible. They don't like that. They don't feel like they're being respected in those situations. However, what I will say is, for digital music, virtual orchestration, I think if you're going to try and make something sound like a real orchestra, but it's using virtual instruments, you still want to make it sound like it's a human doing it, because people will notice. Again, if a flute player never breathes in your virtual orchestra part, like there's something wrong there, because a flute player needs to breathe, right? So breathing moments, sort of natural tails off, and those other little human elements you want to try to replicate with your MIDI expression. Now, for purely digital music, right? If the intention is this is just music that's being played by a computer, which frankly right now is very trendy. There's this new word being on the Twitterverse called digital fusion. It's like this new genre of not necessarily chiptune and not necessarily like realistic, but sort of they call it digital fusion. It's this new, very poppy, very bubbly almost. Another word that's going on is very wholesome, right? Very like it's its own new thing. So I don't write music like that very often at all, but with that comes it's purely digital. It is purely electronic. So by all means, make something that a human couldn't do, because it's not meant to be a human doing it, right? So I think if you look at it from that perspective, again, trying to shoot for something realistic, you want it to sound humanistic. Something that's purely electronic, go like what our scientist was saying about creating these corpses with makeup on based on like programming in his software. Like that's not obviously not meant to sound like it's coming from a human being, right?
That's right.
So I think it's all perspective. It's all intention. If you're intentional about it, I can make things that are bitonal, but if I do it repeatedly and with intention, it's going to sound normal. It's going to sound fine because it's intentional and it's repetitive. I can have a major chord against a minor chord and just slam on it for a few measures, and that will become the new normal, right? So intentionality is everything.
Yeah, and it comes often down for us like what kind of map or what kind of environment we're composing for. If it's like Call of Saregnar, if you're in medieval times, you want it to sound more humanistic because that's where humans live. If you're like me making for Quake or some sort of weird sci-fi thing, it's like, well, I want to make this an alien world. I don't care much about adding humanistic element. I want to add now to put that in perspective. I do want to add natural elements. I want to make it sound like these weird sounds are coming from a creature that could theoretically exist, just not in our world. But then when it comes to like flute playing and just keeping breaths and stuff in there, I'm like, nah, I could leave that, because if I'm talking about robots, I'm just like, I just want to go and make it feel foreign to the person and abrasive to the person. Well, for like Call of Ragnar and all these or like even RuneScape, you kind of want to keep that mood that this is an environment that people live in and they compose music in.
Right. Yeah.
My brain is melted. This is the most. I've not gotten to have like a honest to goodness like deep dive into musical composition conversation in like years. This is so interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to add to that fact. And sometimes when I see someone who normally does something non-orchestral, for example, let's say they do a lot of just like, I don't know, again, electronic or chiptune, and they do their first orchestral thing, the first thing I notice is their mind is still in MIDI land. Their mind is still in, these are the notes, and I'm just going to use a string instrument here and maybe a brass instrument there. And so their mind has not yet shifted into, okay, how does one actually orchestrate? Because even though it's MIDI, you still want to think of how does one orchestrate for a live ensemble. That's still kind of part of it if you're shooting for that realistic thing. And obviously, again, if they're chiptuned for 10 years, no one's expecting them to be like a master orchestrator with their first orchestral track, right? It's just not. It's understandable and it's totally fine and it's great. And I've been very humbled and honored that people have come to me for like, hey, like how can you rate my orchestration? 0 F. No, I don't kid. I don't do that. But it's I love talking about it because we live in a time now where there is you mentioned symphonic metal, where now if you're making symphonic metal, it will be with VSTs. Not everybody has the budget to go and hire an orchestra for every single track in every game. I mean, that's expensive. That you need a huge budget for that. That's like Sony, or Microsoft. That we live in a time where it's important to kind of delve into orchestration. Okay, how does one actually make this sound human? How does one what makes orchestras sound like an orchestra? It's not just one instrument. It's a blend of 60 people, you know.
I guarantee you, when the orchestrator sat down to compose Metallica's S&M, he was like, "How many fucking E flats are we gonna play, bro?" Like,
It's so great to listen to, though. It's so good.
I've got 180 people up here. We're not gonna play E flat the whole time. Let's find a way to make this more interesting, and that's what's so bizarre about it. As I said earlier, the composition of the different genres of music is just so diverse and weird, and really based on the instrument. In rock and roll and in heavy metal, it's very much based on what is the guitar going to do. But for your endeavors, and for Jimmy and everybody else here who doesn't just play a physical instrument, it's very much like you can really experiment. You can really do some interesting things, and you can like kind of take off in a different direction. When you tell a flautist or a pianist,
Yes, that's actually the correct term, I think.
Yeah.
to play in a certain key, they
What
just
a magnificent pianist!
they
Yeah.
just swap it up. They just swap it up. It's a totally different thing. I mentioned earlier, like slide guitar players, right? Like these are the highest paid musicians in the world. If you really think about it, who plays a steel guitar? Nobody. So those
Exactly.
guys that work for the Nashville Music Guild playing the slide guitar, that's one of those like Immorpher kind of moments where it's like, well, we don't always need you, but when we need you, we need you.
Yeah.
You know, and in every single time they play in a different key. So it's either start on a different note or play a different fucking tuning, retune the instrument, or get it, like a harmonica. To maybe that makes more sense to you, like because you buy a harmonica for every key that you're going to play in. You can't just like go totally dynamic with it. It's bizarre. And this has been like such an insane learning experience talking to you specifically, Tony, because I never even considered half the shit you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think even now I still have to tell people, yes, I physically write my sheet music first before I even open my DAW. Like every time, without fail. Even if it's an ambient orchestral track, I still go into Sibelius. I lay out my horizontal, notation stuff, my dynamic markings.
Yeah.
Then I export it into Cubase, and then I do my thing. And people are still like, "Why don't you just open the DAW?" I'm like, because I don't know. My brain doesn't work that way. Like when I write my music, I can't just open a DAW and write into it. It just doesn't happen. I can't do it. I have to see the sheet music. It's just what I grew up with and what I know and what I learned. And people are like, "You're nuts," and I'm like, "I know. I'm sorry."
Yeah.
It's oddly
Yeah,
fascinating.
but everybody has their process,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the interesting things about trying to like pass on your knowledge to other folks is literally, I think everybody's process is different.
Yeah.
And like I could tell you my process, but doesn't mean it's going to work
Yeah.
for you.
Right.
Yeah.
First you take 3 showers and record it in the shower.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah. So
real quick here, just around the table, do you guys ever think that maybe like the music that you produce is it something that's transferable? Could you teach what you do to someone else? Could you make someone else understand how you create what you create, or is it just a flash in the pan kind of thing?
that's hard, man. That's a really hard question, I guess. Like for me, I don't know. I mean, I pick up things like from other musicians and stuff, and I like study their processes, but I don't think like following some exact A to B guide or A to Z guide is the answer. So I probably would say no.
Yeah.
For me personally, like I feel like for me I could probably do so to at least a somewhat of an extent. I guess it's more of my process personally, where
You could teach techniques.
yeah, you could teach
right?
techniques, what type of thing, like you could teach gear as well, like hey
that work, but
yeah, but like the actual process of like how do I actually make like a bunch of random notes from nothing, it's a bit of a harder thing. Like you can point them in the right direction, but that doesn't mean they're gonna like actually like do it. Like
You can lead a
for
horse
me,
to water.
yeah.
well, not everybody knows how to put notes together, how to work, scales. Not everybody knows like the theory of music, what notes actually work with other
And
notes.
even if they do understand that, man, some people just can't make an instrument sing.
Yep.
Yeah, and you have to understand the number one rule of music, and that is the D minor is D minor seventh is the saddest chord in the world.
It is true. It's
And
true. You
yeah.
know, my mom is a pianist. That's what
Your mom's a penis? Oh shit!
Yes, exactly. No, she's a pianist, and
Magnificent pianist.
she's. I mean, she knows music theory. She knows everything in and out of the. But she's always told me, she's like, I've never been able to create my own stuff. She said, over all that stuff, anything I've ever tried to do that's original is usually probably directly derived from something she's played as a concert piano player, right? So I would say that again, she has the theory knowledge, she has the information of what makes up music, but there's not that creative spark of, here's the original idea, now how do I flesh it out, right? And I think that is much like an artist, much like Bob Ross, right? Bob Ross had his own painting style that he could teach other people how to do, but that the image of what they want to paint, they may use Bob Ross's technique. That image of what they're going to paint is their own, right? So I think it's a similar concept with music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you talk about Bob Ross and about visual things, like, and that type of stuff, because like personally, like how I tend to end up creating a lot of things myself at the very least is a lot of times like I work off like a lot of visual stuff. So for instance, if I'm making like a track for a specific level, like let's just say like my mine level in my game, you know, there's like a fucking mine, there's like, you know, fucking trains, there's like lava and shit. I just look at that and I'm like, okay, how would this sound? And I'm like, okay, yeah, it would have like a lot of banging and shit. It'd be like very industrial sounding, like, you know, you get like a feel for how it looks visually, or like, you know, I'm doing a water level. How would that sound? Like there's a bunch of like water and shit happening. Okay, there's gonna be a lot of like softer like harps and shit, you know, that type of stuff. And so I go off of visuals and stuff.
I can't imagine you telling that to like a first year music student and then be like, "Yeah, I get that." You know what I mean? Like the sentence that you just said.
Yeah.
Music theory 101. There's lava.
Yeah, there's lava.
Yeah, listen, you gotta make
just make a bunch of shit and make it sound like shit. Just like
Yeah, and a lot of time with new musicians, you have to kind of let them just fumble around a little bit to find what their natural, kind of like natural at. We all have certain neural pathways that send us into particular directions. And sometimes, like, I will hear someone composing a MIDI, and like, that sounds exactly what I did when I was composing MIDI back then. Then it becomes a little bit easier to say what mistakes I made. Like, did I compose something through a 3-armed drummer, and people are going to find very awkward for this track? You know, yeah. Or like MIDI, Jimmy might understand this. Like if you go, like, depending what program you have, if you go below C3 or C2 on the distorted guitar, it starts sounding like machine farts because it has to stretch those notes out. So if you're going to go there, you have to be careful and make sure you have enough layers to make that machine fart actually add bass to it and not just sound disgusting, unless you really want to sound like machine farts.
I ran into a very similar situation yesterday where I'm trying to like help with the sound design for Stellar Valkyrie, and as I'm doing so, I'm like, okay, well, what do I have around me? Like, how can I make weird sci-fi sounds? So I'm like, I got this guitar and this amp and all these weird effects. Let me try it. So I take an AR-15 and I take a guitar and I'm like, okay, let's do some phasers, some reverb, some distortion, see what kind of weird like wow sounds I can come up with. And I'm like, okay, and then let's change the pitch a bit. And you can take a sound like that, and then, you know, it goes from being this like super heavy metal sounding sound to like the weirdest, like that sounds just like what a sci-fi vehicle would sound like, kind of thing. Or in this case, I was trying to make a gun sound. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
let's see what happens. Layer some stuff together, and it's just bizarre.
Yeah,
like what you can do by simply changing the pitch of something, like nothing else. No, you know, don't add any reverb. Don't add, like, just change the pitch, see what happens. In
that,
like,
yeah, that's that reminds me of like how I'm going, because like even though like I like to say that music comes pretty naturally to me because I've always like been musically inclined my whole life. Like sound design though is something I'm still like trying to get my grips on, learn. Like I'm still figuring that shit out like a lot. Like for
it's
instance,
so
for, like,
subjective.
yeah. So like for instance, what you're saying for like, you know, making like a laser gun sound, I had to do like something kind of like that, and I basically just made like some weird noises with my mouth. I was like, you know, like that kind of shit, and then just put it through enough filters and like some other shit, and it sounded like a fucking laser gun. Or
I mean, I made I was so proud of this sound that I came up with. I'm like, this is so interesting. I am 100% in. And then like Scumhead's like, that's dog shit, bro. We're not using that. You know what I mean? Like I spent a long time like coming up with this weird sound. And he's just like, and if there's anybody's opinion that I respect, is like it's him. I'm like, all right, well.
Yeah, that actually some kind of like that actually ended up happening with me. I was going to be doing some sound effects for this one game. I think it was like Relentless Frontier. I was going to be doing some sound effects for them, but basically it ended up going through because falling through just because like I wasn't able to like get the sound effects to like the quality they wanted, which I mean shit happens. Like I have no bad blood with the dude. In fact, we were just hanging out last night. He's pretty cool. But yeah, it's just like it's just a learning process when you're actually coming to like making all these weird sounds and shit. I actually, one of the most valuable things if you're going to be doing sound design is just getting like a portable recorder. I think that's like one of the most valuable things you can invest in.
I was just gonna say that because like if you know the laser sound for the Star Wars gun, that iconic, that is literally just them hitting one of those wires that holds a telephone pole in place. It's the tension.
Well, the Doom shotgun sound is a door slamming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't understand how sound design works because somebody asked you to create a sound that doesn't exist. What does a phaser gun sound like? And the only reference they have is Star Wars, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like and then everything.
Well, that kind of comes down to like the creativity aspect. You know what I mean? Like I think you see that in bands too. You see the people who glom towards being in cover bands, and then you see the people who glom towards being in original bands. And I feel like the ones who move more towards original bands are the ones who kind of understand where to go musically. And I feel like, obviously the cover band people are the ones who just kind of want to play music, but don't quite have the skill set to know where to go yet.
Yeah.
And we see that, and it's the same. It's always, and it's not something you can. I don't think that's something you can teach. I mean, I think you can teach it to a certain point, but I think you have to have the ability innate to really, go beyond a certain point. And it's
a lot of it comes down to your obsession, really, to put in the hours to do it, because you have to put in a lot of hours into that. I was sitting there programming my synthesizer for, I don't know, for a year. Who knows if I didn't know if anything would good coming out of that. It could have been pure garbage, but I just got obsessed enough to keep on going and put in the hours. And it's not just like put in hours like once a week. You have to be continually doing it so you get your mind in the right neural pathway that kind of solidifies itself to really be able to fully go over the barrier and reach that path.
So it's more like you're learning the actual like synthesizer itself and like becoming one with it in a way, I guess.
Yeah.
Because when you understand your instrument or whatever tool you're using, you know how, like, its limits. You know what you can do with it, and a lot of times, I see this a lot in early mix students. Is they're really afraid to dial knobs and push sliders, like they just barely touch stuff, and they're just constantly moving around the board, barely touching these little knobs. And I'm like, give it see what it's doing. Rip that thing up, and you have to be willing to just tear it apart to bring it back to something good. Yes, Ty.
Sorry, I know that I'm supposed to be the host here, but I have all these things I wanted to talk about with you guys. And so, one of my best friends, his name's Jake. He's been on the show before, not you, Immorpher. He was with me when we went to go interview Vince Desi. And you probably, the people who are fans of the show have heard his voice at least. And he is an acoustic guitar player. And I mean, when I say he's an acoustic guitar player, this motherfucker plays the acoustic guitar. I mean, he can do bluegrass, country, folk, anything, just beautifully. I give him an electric guitar and it's like, and when you're talking about turning knobs, playing with tones, playing with like mid frequency, bass, treble, all this stuff, totally foreign. He could not be more lost. And I'll be sitting there like I'm hearing him make magic, but I'm just like I'll literally like walk up behind him and like turn a dial here and there. Like, yeah, I can't imagine not understand, like, because I grew up on it. I can't imagine not understanding how that stuff works. And it's so important to how you produce, especially with you guys. Like, mostly everything we do translates to some sort of digital format. If you don't get that stuff, you're not doing much in our world. but for most people, it's like, this is the way my music sounds. I'm gonna play it into a microphone, publish my single, and I'm going on. And no big deal.
Boy, if it would only work that way,
Yeah.
right?
But how could you possibly teach someone? And I'm curious because you have a background in doing this with people. How do you teach someone tone?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hard because I mean, there are a lot of people who are tone deaf, and it's really hard to teach a tone deaf person tone, and it's really hard to teach somebody what sounds good because it's like again, it's like it is a trained skill, but you got to be born with a little something something to start you out, because I'm sorry, but and I don't mean to be rude or anything, but somebody who's truly tone deaf, no matter how much time or energy or money they throw at it, they're always going to be tone deaf.
It's like explaining color to a blind man.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just not going to work. So there has to be some sort of innate ability there that you just can connect with it, because there's a reason why, if you look at the music industry and just the way music is, everything's split up, kind of like the game industry. You don't really have a whole bunch of people doing everything. In studios, you have a guy who's setting up all the mics because they're really good at that, but they usually work with the guy at the desk because they know they're a partnership. It's like a little team, like a spotter and a sniper. Then you've got your guy, the recording engineer, who just records it. Then it goes on to the mixing engineer, who's a whole different guy with a whole different set of tools and a different board setup. And then he kicks it out to a mixing engineer, which has a whole nother set of tools and a whole nother board. And to be the jack of all trades is a very daunting task, and especially if you want to be really good at any one of those particular tasks. And I think that's kind of where we sit with music, is there is such a deep learning curve once you get past that initial creation process. There's a whole nother world past once you've got the music down in a recording. Now you've got to make it sound good. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to make it playable on literally every format and not sound like crap.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that too, actually, because the indie game scene for composers specifically is we often, not even just musically, we create the music, we mix the music. Oftentimes we have to master the music, and we have to market it, and we've got a network, and we've got to make sure that we have our emails. Oh, by the way, I guess we got to eat something too, right? We have to wear
sleep.
Sleep. Don't forget about sleep, or your family, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's. And I think, in a way, that's why the indie game community is so neat, is because it's not that we have to dress to impress absolutely everybody. As long as whoever we're working with is happy, in many ways that has to be kind of good enough. Because I just know that my orchestral mixes are not going to sound as good as Alan Meyerson's orchestral mixes, who mixes Hans Zimmer's music. It's just not going to sound like that.
Yeah.
But you have people referencing, "Oh, can you make your stuff sound like this Hans Zimmer track?" It's like, well, compositionally, in terms of the notes on the page, sure. As for the mix quality, maybe not so much. I'm just going to have to do my best. So again, I think, and there will get to a point, the AAA music scene, obviously, in games, they will have the composer, and they will have the music editor, and they will have the mixer, and they will have the mastering person. I mean, even Austin Wintory, his music is mixed by someone else, and he's kind of double A. I mean, he's kind of in like the post-indie scene. He's not doing Halo. I guess he did Assassin's Creed, which is pretty AAA. But even then, there's this... It's in the beginning stages where we wear every single hat, and so all we can do is the best that we have and the best that we can. Yeah. Later in life, then if money and budget allows, then you can split and delegate and whatever, which makes it all the much more difficult, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to add to that is that situation, especially for young composers who are trying to wear all the hats. They are looking to all these inspirations, so they'll consult someone. Like for instance, I've had people come into me and say, "Oh, can you mix it and make it sound like Chris Lord Algae?" I'm like, "Well, I can, get it close, but if you really want Chris Lord Algae, you need to go see Chris Lord Algae." I'm not trying to be Chris Lord Algae. I'm trying to be my own style. And ultimately, every musician or studio engineer, or just anybody who is an artisan, trying to be an artisan in their craft, is going to settle into a style of their own. And that's kind of our goal, is to become one of those names that people, "Oh, can you make me sound like so-and-so?" Yeah. And by trying to imitate others, it's not helping us. It's not helping the young artist. So, I mean, I think it's important that we I guess identify to some of the young artists who come to us and say, "Oh, can you make it sound like so and so?" Just maybe reiterate to them, "How about we make it sound like your own?"
Yeah.
So this has been like amazing. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Good idea, Ty. Great
Job, Ty.
great one.
Love being here.
To all of you, man, like you're all really special and unique individuals who've given a lot to our communities. Some of you, have been doing it for a long time. Some of you are just now making your name, breaking into the indie game industry and all that. But indie games wouldn't happen without people like y'all. I just want to say that I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thanks, Ty. We love you too, man.
Thanks for bringing us together.
Ooh. But just any closing thoughts, any like last minute little like to anybody
We need
out
to
there
start a
listening
band.
kind of
Is my closing thought. We need to start a band.
Like a virtual band would be cool. Do that like a virtual track, and just like everybody puts down their thing and then sends it off to someone else, and they put their thing down and just see what happens.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
7-way collab. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you guys make it happen, I will edit it into the end of this video.
Okay. Well, we got to get past a few things first, so we got some work to do still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say if anyone's listening to this and they want to get into music, we all came from very different directions. So whatever direction you start at, that's the right direction to go.
Yeah.
And whatever direction you want to end up at, musicians now are not just producers that send music to fans. We're part of the community now. So feel free to hit us up. And even if I don't know something, I'll probably send you to Primeval.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing for the past year. If I don't know something,
I'll just start doing that too. Just literally send everything to him.
Yeah. Like honestly, like just again, the biggest tip, just start, honestly. Like whether you're
Yeah.
like, demoing a DAW or whatever, or like writing music down or just practicing an instrument, just fucking start. That's really the only advice that I could give that I can universally say is gonna be your best bet of like actually getting anywhere. Is you need to start.
I think that applies to everything too. Like art, everything. Just start like putting things on paper, just start making noise and something will lead you somewhere.
Yeah, don't be like, like the whole like, oh, I'm going to do this then, or I'm going to do this now. No, just do
Yeah,
it,
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid like waiting, I got to get the right riff before I put it down. No, like lay down some horrible, terrible crap that's just like everything your brain can think of, and then just you pick and choose,
Yeah.
I think the very first year of my compositional life, I had to get all of the bad ideas out of my system first. I had to just let them all spill out onto the page. And then finally I was able to actually like get it to a refined state. And that's like where I am now, I suppose. I've just been able to shed all of the sort of insecurities and the lack of confidence that I had like starting out with this sort of thing. Now I'm just one of the other many people in this indie scene, in this like wholesome, in this incredibly vibrant and varied scene that is just making music just on the regular, and it's just it really does kind of fill a hole in the soul kind of thing. So I would just definitely say to anyone who wants to start out, just start out, see what you can come up with yourself. If you don't get anywhere at first, don't be despondent. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. To any of us, me especially, I love helping people. I just consider myself to be just a guy, just a guy making music. There's no real like need to like deify really any of us, or just just
He's
to say
lying. You have to call through Jimmy's agent to schedule him.
Sir Jimmy.
yeah, seriously, like we're just people. Just talk to us. We're humans. We've made mistakes.
Man, I still put down, like when I'm starting to compose, still the first like hour is usually crap. And I've been doing this a very, very long time, and I still do not ever, like rarely do I ever hit the ground running. And I consider that like a lightning in a bottle type of moment, and those don't come along very often. So don't be discouraged if you've been doing this a while and you still are struggling. Like it's always a struggle. It's never not going to be a struggle,
If in doubt, get in the shower.
Yeah. Just go take a shower, and I guarantee you'll come up with something really quick, and it'll make you want to run naked out of the shower, screaming to your studio to try and get it down before it falls apart.
Make sure your windows are closed before that, though.
The final, like This whole podcast was about basically saying, listen, you're listening to this, you're probably a gamer, you should take a shower.
Yeah.
Okay? You smell like shit, go take a shower.
Well, the rule is if you can smell your balls, it's time to take a shower.
Yeah. That's a pretty good rule, yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
For my grandmother
I
to
think
listen to
just
this.
and just to piggyback off of Jimmy, I think sincerely do not hesitate to email even people you think in the back of your mind, oh, they're never going to reply to this.
Yeah.
The worst thing they can do is to not reply to it. And I'm not saying any one of us here necessarily, but I'm talking like the big names, right?
Yeah.
The worst thing they can do is not reply, and that's at no fault of your own. So I think truly, as a topic earlier was, to kind of not to be aggressive in terms of like
Don't be mean.
hateful sense, but right, you don't want to be mean,
Yeah.
but aggressive in the
Hungry.
sense of hungry for growth, enthusiastic for growth, and enthusiastic to connect. I mean, again, the worst thing you can do is to start comparing and to say, oh well, I'm worse than them, or so and so is better than me. I think if we all are in this in a sense of we are all colleagues and we're all doing our own thing, we're all trying to make it work, we're all trying to make ends meet, and you establish community and connection rather than fighting against everyone else for the same job.
Yep.
You're gonna find a much easier time to kind of wean your way through the industry, because it's no longer about, well, I have to be better than everyone else. It's I want to be a part of this with everyone else and find our own way together, right? It's a dog eat dog industry. Don't get me wrong. It's tough, but it's possible, right? I think the 7 of us here are living proof. Many others out there and thousands of others out there in the world are doing the same exact thing. So it is possible. You just gotta have the energy and the drive to, in a sense, make it happen.
Be tenacious.
Tenacious D.
Be tenacious.
The cream rises to the top.
That's right.
Cream.
And I just want to leave my
Todd, can I
closing
just
remark as buy our games. Thank you.
Why
Or
are
are you
you
gonna
Ty,
say
I just want to hang out with you for a day and just to see. I want to make note of all the comments you make and how ridiculous they are. They're amazing. They're fantastic. I want a book of your comments, Ty. A book.
It's a Southern colloquialism book or whatever. Like, how many wrestling references can this guy make in one day? Let's see. All right. We're done. Good night, everybody. I love you. The Drowned God Cathala loves you. Until next time,
Yeah.
stay in the keep.
Peace out, people.
Peace.